Personality crash, portraits of my father who suffered from advanced stages of Parkinson's disease, Dementia and Sundowners Syndrome. This explores the human condition when altered by disease from an intimate perspective. The work presents my family's personal journey, but also serves as a universal reminder of what it means to be human. From a young age, I've had a relationship with photography. Throughout my life, I've turned to my camera to help interpret the world around me, especially as a vehicle for understanding major events in my life. And as a documentarian, it is my natural instinct to embrace what unfolds in front of me. So in 2013, in the early stages of my father's Parkinson's diagnosis, I approached him about doing this body of work. Again, we didn't know what this would entail, but he was still mostly autonomous at this point, and he only really needed assistance with a walker or a cane from time to time. He agreed, and this body of work was made from a heartfelt desire to understand the unknown road ahead of us. And also as a bridge to keep us connected during a time when I felt, or it felt like illness was going to pull us apart. My father was an active participant and collaborator in this body of work up until his last day. And when you take the time to go through the exhibit and look at the work, you can see that he's actively confronting the viewer at various stages throughout the journey. Oftentimes he would tell me to go get my camera on days when I was focused on just managing his care. Balancing caregiving and documenting simultaneously was challenging. I would either have to manage one hand on him and one hand on my camera, or find a way to stabilize him while making an image, or rely on my mom or Rosa, who's in this photo over here combing his hair. She was our long-term caregiver who assisted us with him, and she became like a family member. So either they would be working with him and I would photograph around that, or else I'd have to figure out how to stabilize him and get photos. I had not anticipated becoming my father's caregiver. I fell into it because the need arose and I was there. I wasn't prepared for it. And it definitely took some personal adjustments on my end, both mentally and physically. I came to realize that it meant putting parts of my own life on hold, which at first was very frustrating and difficult. But after a conversation with a friend who had already lost both of his parents, I realized it just clicked in my brain, and I gave myself an attitude adjustment and and realized the true gift it was to be there with my dad for this time in his life. So my father began taking Sinemet, which is the main Parkinson's medication, in August 2010. Time had now become my father's keeper, and there were new rules to follow. 2.5 pills at spaced intervals 4 times a day. Protein interacts with the absorption of the medicine, so no food 2 hours prior to or an hour after dosing. Make sure to dose at the same time every day. Watch the clock. Everything now revolves around the clock. Papa had become a prisoner of time. And as time progressed, the Sinemet would have side effects. And those side effects required other medications that the neurologist would prescribe, and in turn, those would have side effects. So it became this never-ending circle and cycle of pill popping. Papa's symptoms changed over time. In the beginning, as I mentioned, he had a tremor in one hand. That vanished in the latter years, and latter years of his diagnosis when the muscle rigidity took over. I think a lot of people have the misconception that Parkinson's is a shaking disease, but for my dad, it manifested with muscle rigidity, and then when he took the medicine, that is what made his body dyskinetic. I'm not saying it's like that for everybody, but it was like that for my dad. He would experience stiffness in his hands, arms, legs, and overall body, but he also had tension in his mouth and facial muscles. His facial expressions often appeared anguished or angry, but these expressions did not necessarily correlate with how he felt. These were, I assume, muscle spasms or misfirings because of the Parkinson's. And sometimes he would battle diarrhea, sometimes he'd battle constipation. Again, there's so many facets to this disease. He had excessive saliva, he would experience drooling. In his final year, he developed a very viscousy phlegm that I would need to aspirate out of his throat with a suction machine. And then he could breathe clearly for just a little while, and then it would rebuild, and we would have to go through the process again. In the beginning of his diagnosis, he was still able to get around and do things without assistance. He could walk with his walker or rollator. He would prepare his own meals, go to the bathroom, do his own showers. As the disease progressed, at his low, usually right before dosing time, he could not open his eyes. He could not lift a glass of water to his mouth. He had difficulty swallowing. The viscous mucus would accumulate in his throat. He would need assistance with transferring between the bed and a chair, or the chair and the toilet, et cetera. He would sometimes even pass out when we were transferring him from one location to the next, and we learned that that was because he had low blood pressure, which can be caused by the Parkinson's itself or by the Parkinson's medication. He would need to be bathed, fed, and diapered. He would need help administering his medication, and he would need to be put down for naps throughout the day, so essentially he became my child. His medicine would give him back a certain amount of mobility, like I mentioned before. It would create this uncontrollable dyskinesia. And his limbs would flail, and sometimes he would get bruised because he couldn't control the flailing. So a typical day, and this is not in the early stages, this is in this phase. The work you see here is mostly the last 6 months of his life. In this phase, a typical day looked like this. 7 a.m., suction out Papa's viscous throat mucus with aspirator machine. Give Papa his Cinemet medicine. 8 a.m., wake Papa, feed him a banana, transfer him from bed to wheelchair, take him to toilet and shower, diaper, dress, and groom him. 9:30 a.m., feed Papa breakfast. 10 a.m., bathroom visit, transfer Papa back to bed for nap. 11:20 a.m., give Papa his Cinemet medicine. 12:30 p.m., wake Papa, feed him a snack for energy, transfer to wheelchair, take him to toilet, change diaper as needed, check bedding. 1 p.m., feed Papa lunch. 2:30 p.m., bathroom visit, transfer Papa to bed for afternoon nap. 4:20 p.m., give Papa his Cinemet medicine. 5:30 p.m., wake up Papa, feed him a snack for energy, transfer to wheelchair, take him to toilet, change diaper as needed, check bedding. 6 p.m., feed Papa dinner. 8 p.m., give Papa his Cinemet and clonazepam medicines. Take him to bathroom, put on 2 sets of diapers, transfer him to bed for the night. Build the cocoon. Tuck him in with lots of pillows to protect him from the hospital bed side rails since he thrashes during sleep. 9 p.m., start monitoring Papa for sundowning episodes. So the title of the show, the phrase personality crash, was actually coined by my father. On October 2nd, 2017, he started talking to me about personality crashes, a term I'd never heard before. When asked to clarify, he explained that he was having the personality crash without his knowledge. And this was a true awakening for me. It let me know that he was very aware of what was happening to him and that he was conscious of his own demise. When we eventually transitioned to hospice care, I felt abandoned by the medical system. Nurses came sporadically to check on Papa and to change the dressing of his bed sore, but we rarely saw the same nurse twice. The inconsistency caused my father anxiety, stirring up feelings of paranoia and distrust, and was exhausting and overwhelming for us. As we'd have to explain the details of Papa's case over and over again to each new nurse who came through. So I ended up managing my dad's bed sores on my own, just to provide him comfort and consistency, and also to avoid having to repeat the story a million times to new people coming into the house. So this journey with my father reinforced the notion that it is so important to advocate for yourself and for your loved ones throughout any kind of health system. to be unapologetically vocal, and to not settle for the status quo. You have to do your own research and be firm in your requests. The gift my father and I received through all of this was the incredible amount of time we got to spend together. We became even closer through this journey. We were already close, but we really became much closer through this journey, and he was always a loving father. And towards the end of his life, he would often reach out from his home hospital bed and offer me a hug and tell me that I was from heaven, which was a big change because when I was a kid, this is off script, but when I was a kid, I would always get told, Intia Kruta, which means you're a little devil. So I was always getting into mischief. It was his way of expressing his gratitude, and I will always treasure those moments. He was very proud of this project, as is my family and myself. So ultimately, personality crash is an exploration of loss, my father's loss of autonomy and self, and my own loss of the father I had known my whole life. But it's also about family bonds and the power of love in the face of adversity. The most challenging part of the collaboration was bearing witness to the intricacies of my father's decline. He had been my protector, my champion, my role model, who seemed indestructible in my eyes. As much as it gave me a window into understanding his physical and cognitive changes, this project also gave my father strength and resolve. It gave him daily purpose, something to look forward to, and it kept him engaged in the world that I knew. It came to represent his own survival, though in reality we were chronicling his demise. In his final year, my father had increasing moments of confusion, hallucination, disorientation, and major disconnect from simple instruction and the tactile world around him. My father became my child, whom I cared and protected and advocated for. I literally parented my parent and would go to all ends to guarantee his visibility and dignity in the world. In retrospect, this project is bigger than either of us and more than just a bridge between our different realities on the road to my father's death. The New York Times featured this work, calling it raw and emotionally fraught, and the photographs themselves powerful in their honesty. From the beginning, we agreed to present an honest and vulnerable, compassionate story to honor his journey. We wanted to humanize the experience of losing one's sense of self while aging with disease. Our long-term intentions were to bring visibility to an overlooked demographic and raise awareness about the multifaceted complexities of this disease, aging with disability, end-of-life care, and dignified death. Through this collaboration, I came to new understandings of disease and mental illness, distinguishing the disease from the individual, and the process of anticipatory grief. It was an unexpected lesson in learning the depth of my own capacity to love, as well as the profundity of my own anguish. So now about the exhibit. Building the exhibit was another unexpected journey in revisiting my grief. It reopened the wound of the full firsthand caregiving experience, bringing back all of the emotions of the journey and the loss again, including my post-loss grief. I hadn't considered just how difficult it would be to delve back into the imagery, some of which I hadn't looked at since the day I made. Sifting through my journal entries compounded the experience, because again, when I was keeping those, there was no forethought that this would go out into the world. These were just me trying to figure out my life and what was happening in front of me with my family. I knew there would be emotionally tender images and writings to confront again, but I didn't realize how strongly they would affect me. And perhaps that is a personal awakening to how raw my grief still is today. And again, there's no set timeline for moving through loss, so it's just an individual evolution. And now here I was caregiving for this documented journey this time, while trying to honor my dad as honestly and tenderly as I could. So I had to push through this second round of grief. I had to push through to honor my father's and our family's journey, and also to deliver an impactful experience in the form of this layered exhibit. And I will forever have deep gratitude for the National Endowment for the Arts and the Parkinson's Foundation for their support in helping bring this to fruition. And also, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, to Blue Sky for being the first gallery outside of the grant welcoming this into your space. So to wrap up my portion, my father lived with Parkinson's diagnosed for almost 9 years. We didn't fully understand the magnitude of the diagnosis when we got it. We came to learn the cruelty of the disease as it progressed through my father's journey. It stripped him of his autonomy and his humanity. We watched and tried to comfort him as best we could as he slowly reverted to the most primal of survival mechanisms. In his final 2 years, the Dementia and Sundowners presented themselves, and it was emotionally challenging to watch and make sense of his cognitive changes. The work on the walls, this is just a small glimpse into a very complex disease. Today and every day, I want to say I recognize the struggles of those, sorry, I just lost my place, but those with Parkinson's and dementia and illness in general, as well as the toll it takes on their loved ones. This disease not only affects the individual, but the family. And learning to recognize the manifestations and behaviors of the disease and how to separate that from your loved one, that's challenging and it takes time, understanding and empathy, but it's important that we all try to do that. And just note to self, note to you all, like hug your loved ones every day, express to them how much they mean to you, like truly get to know them, make lasting memories, and cherish your time together, and approach everything you do from a place of love. And that's all I have. So that's part one. Now we're going to move into part two, which is my performers here, my creatives who have Parkinson's. They're going to present some of their creativity for you. First up is Miguel Sanchez. I'm going to pass this over to you in 1 second, but I just want to read his bio to you so you have a little background on Miguel. Miguel and I are old friends. You were diagnosed just shortly after my dad, I feel like. 2010, yeah, a year after my dad. So Miguel and I have, through this journey, through my journey with my dad and through his own personal journey, we've been in constant communication and shared a lot of information with each other and just what's happening in each of our worlds, comparing notes, which has been very important, I think, for us both. So he's a writer, a photographer, a person with Parkinson's. Miguel got Parkinson's from exposure to, okay, I'm going to try to say this, trichloroethylene while doing search and rescue for the U.S. Coast Guard. He wrote his first song when he was 7 called Shut Up Grandma. It was immediately banned in his house, but he has written ever since, anything from manifestos to poetry, plays, essays, and prose. In the 90s in LA, he was involved in the poetry scene and organized poetry readings. He writes mostly for himself and shares with his close friends, as he will today. Miguel has a son, daughter-in-law, and grandson in Chicago. And I just want to say also, I'm so thankful that Miguel is here today. He has been at both of the other exhibitions, and he's presented his creative writing there too, and I'm forever indebted to you for doing that. So thank you, Miguel. I will pass over the mic. Do you need to hold on to my arm so you can see your way out?
I think I can make it. I just read through one.
You just don't want to hold on. Come this way.
This is called Parkinson's resting face or resting mask. Parkinson's masking or resting face. This is a little angry rant. You are a good person. Parkinson's takes from your body, gives to the already aches and pains, and creates even more. It takes from your psyche and multiplies it. The medications for the chronic degenerative brain disease are a mind fuck, adding and subtracting personality traits at the stock exchange of dopamine. Those who think they know Parkinson's by tremor, those who have it and think speaking in Hallmark card tongues and praying to satellites of higher powers, y'all are washing your hair with sand. Look honestly at the situation. Knowledge is power. Deep brain stimulation is voodoo science. Can we measure the quantity of dopamine in the brain? No. Can we measure the amount of serotonin in the brain? No. The only way you truly know if you have Parkinson's is to have an autopsy. They say you don't die from Parkinson's, you die with Parkinson's. The leading cause of death with Parkinson's are pneumonia, choking, and falling. He didn't fall, he was pushed. It wasn't the crash that killed her, it was a sudden stopping. Only one medication is made exclusively for Parkinson's, the rest are all off-branded. And that exclusive medication causes involuntary, uncontrollable twitching, fidgeting, and flailing called dyskinesias. The doctors know nothing about the disease. There is little for them to discern for diagnosis, relying upon the patients to tell them how and what they are feeling. This is why every person with Parkinson's has to go to Google Medical School and educate themselves about this insidious disease. That's just an angry rant. Don't take it for anything more than that, because sometimes there's anger with disease, especially chronic, painful disease. This next piece is called Sumter, and ironically, it's a town in Madison. It's also a town in South Carolina, which we know about. And it's also a town that when Dave was going to college, he surveyed and mapped a town called Sumter, Oregon, and it was hanging in his garage, and when I came to visit him, we made a connection on that. So the title of this is called Sumter. I'm shaking too much. I'm going to sit like this. I packed up and headed towards Sumter after Googling weird shit to do in Wisconsin within 50 miles of Madison. I was going to go see Dr. Evermore's Forevertron. The Guinness Book of World Records said it's the largest steel sculpture in the world. Google Maps located at a place called Sumter, some 36 miles away when choosing the route with less freeway. Perfect. Country roads and farms and a premature autumnal landscape. Yellowing trees, corn looking like tamale husks, surprisingly little roadkill, red barns with sandstone foundations, no flocks of starlings, murders of crows, or the sing-song tweets of red-winged blackbirds. Just me and a couple of hogs with doubled-up helmetless riders flying patriotic colors taking the curves calm and courteous. I followed behind a bug-splattered windscreen, listening to public radio station playing classical music. Obama, Biden, Hillary, Bernie bumper stickers on my rear. Kickaboo Road, Missouri Club, Black Earth, Snuffy's Campground, Natural Bridge State Park, and an amazing roadside monument remembering Wisconsin vets with a tank positioned between an F-9F Panther Navy fighter jet and an HU-1 Huey helicopter, both on pedestals at attack angles. Acres of tiring corn provided a backdrop for this well-maintained display of pride. I passed the hot LZ, exited the highway, and I was now in what I assumed to be Sumter. The street ran the perimeter of a group of small white bungalows reminiscent of shotgun houses in New Orleans. But these were plain, not modest, but poor. They had asbestos siding that looked rotted if asbestos could rot. On the small front lawns were scattered sun-bleached plastic toys and the rusted, discarded contents of toolboxes and things left unrepaired. It looked like a box of faded photographs upended. There were cars and motorcycles that wouldn't interest a used car salesman. Nothing on blocks and no one about, adult, pet, or child. It scared me. The loneliness of it resembled my life. Is this how I will be found, alone amongst the clutter of life? I feel claustrophobic in my own skin. There are never very long moments of comfort. I'm never able to sit still for long or lay down for long. There seems to be no chair or pill that will comfort me. I feel I'm being pushed by a relentless agitation, a ceaseless constant fatigue. I wish for quiet still moment, but I'm afraid only in death will I find tranquility. The way I shake, I'm the rattle of a snake. My hand shakes like the wings of a cicada shake under the sun, under the tree whose leaves shake from the wind. The wind shakes from the moon. Together we shake like the fur of a dog stepping out of the water or a horse's hide shaken off a fly. Everything has a frequency, has a cycle, has a season, has a breath, has a beat, has a moon, and has a sun. I will never know stillness again. I have difficulty with silverware and chopsticks. I have a blank, expressionless face called Parkinson's masking. Because of constipation and tremors, my ass is often shitty. Because of spastic bladder, my pants are often wet. Because of tremors, I often miss the toilet bowl. Because of my gait and posture, I'm often mistaken for drunk, and sometimes they're right. Because of tremor, I have difficulty typing and texting, and so I use dictation, which is imperfect and equally frustrating. I can't dance or run or fight. I can ride a bike sometimes. Sometimes I can mow the lawn and rake it and sweep the sidewalks. I like washing dishes. It makes me feel useful, and it's meditative. Cooking can be difficult, like chopping vegetables and stirring pots. When I have sex, I'm usually on the bottom because it's too hard to be on top. Laying in bed is not easy. The bed swallows me up, and it's difficult to move. Rolling over and changing positions is very difficult. My eyesight is constantly changing, though new glasses have helped some. Still, every day my eyesight is different. I believe that's related to my blood pressure. I have orthostatic hypotension, which is the lowering of blood pressure upon standing up. I can pass out from that, but I haven't yet. I worry that I'm going to die from choking because of the difficulty I have with swallowing, which is a Parkinson symptom. I worry about falling and hitting my head because my balance is bad. I do yoga to try and offset this feeling, and it seems to help. The third thing I worry about is pneumonia, which is easier for me to get because of the difficulty in swallowing. I'm also more likely to develop skin cancer because of Parkinson's. I don't admit this easily, but I'm privately terrified of what the future may bring. There is no cure for Parkinson's, and there is no real understanding of its causes. There are no tests to prove 100% that one has Parkinson's. And like there is no way to measure the amount of serotonin in one's brain, there is no way to measure the amount of dopamine in one's brain. So the medications are not accurate or precise, and of course every person is different. Their metabolism is different, their symptoms are different, and their reactions to the medications are different. The side effects of medications vary from person to person, and the daily symptoms vary in each person. Every person has to go through an agonizing process of figuring out how all of this works for themselves. They say if you meet a person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's. Sometimes there's the feeling of having to prove I have Parkinson's because I might not be shaking, because that's all people understand about Parkinson's. It makes you shake. When in fact shaking is the easy part. How it affects your life, your relationships, the small intimate nuances of one's life is so daunting and complex as to cause one to give up. My lover, my caregiver, she thinks I'm negative and pessimistic and don't do enough to help myself get better or be better. This may be true to her, and to her I may be that way, and certainly I am that way at times. But to say that that is all I am is dismissing who I am and the subtleties and perpetuities of this disease. This disease and I, well, she is now my ex. I try to find joy in simple things like walking our dog or riding a bike or eating. I like taking photographs. I like writing poems. I love travel and road trips. That's why I'm here. I love visiting family and friends. I love reading. I love being alive. I love getting out of bed to see what the day will bring, even if I feel like complete shit and want to kill myself. I still want to see what's around the corner. Curiosity is what keeps me going. Still want to know things. I still want to learn. I love history. I want to know the trees and birds wherever I am. I know so little about art and art history and want to learn as much as I can. I've applied to be a docent at a local museum in order to understand and learn and be amongst people and try to get over my fear of how I'm perceived or think I'm perceived, standing there in pain, shaking, tired, bent, searching for the right words to say how much I love you. Thank you, thank you. This is an odd piece. It's called Eugene, Dave, and the Vagabond. And it's a hybrid piece. It's a kind of a memoir, travel journal / haibun, which a haibun is a Japanese form of travel journal mixed with haiku. But instead of haiku, I mix in the words of a guy called the Vagabond, who was patterned after the Sam Elliott character in The Big Lebowski known as the Stranger. When I get depressed, I don't brush my teeth. Then people complain about my breath, but not my depression. I also let my hair grow out, my beard grow out, and then I don't go out at all. I went to Eugene to figure it out. She wanted me out of her space, out of her house. So I went to stay with my friend Dave, who also has Parkinson's. We're the same age, and I've known him since we were 15. I'm sitting under the warm shade of a sycamore tree. There's a metronome on the table between Dave and I. There are two choices, happy or sleepy. We smoked happy. Our conversation was rhythmic and stoned. The tree knew how many leaves it had, and there were 84 beats per minute exiting the metronome. I mowed the lawn, Dave pulled the weeds. We did this to the metronome. We played chess with the metronome. We cooked dinner with the metronome, and we sat in silence with the metronome. Dave has chairs strategically positioned throughout his house that he runs towards like a baby learning to walk. He uses them to keep himself from falling. He has a shuffling gait, and his gait also freezes such that his legs move like sewing machine needles that don't go anywhere. And then, suddenly they work again and send him off running in the direction he's facing. The chairs are what stop him. The Vagabond says, "Don't compare your condition with another's condition. Your disease is not the same as another's in spite of the diagnosis being the same." I was feeling hesitant about coming to Eugene and staying with Dave. I was just unsure how it would go, two guys with Parkinson's alone without their caregivers. I really didn't know Dave that well. We had friends in common with only a few stories to tell. He must have sensed my hesitation, so he sent me a daily routine he thought we could do that included 4 naps every day along with morning exercise, dog walking, bike riding, hiking, yard chores, house chores like cooking and cleaning the dishes. Most of this was true with the exception of naps. It turned out he resented my naps and he never stopped moving. He was working on his wife's bicycle and he was building a wooden canoe. My fine motor skills were shot. He thought if I mowed the lawn, which was a half an acre with a gas-powered push mower, that he'd have more time to sand his canoe. When I finished the back lawn, he said he was still pulling weeds. He suggested I mow the front lawn, which I did. We went to the Eugene version of Home Depot to buy paper suits, respirators, and a sandpaper. Dave forgot to bring his wallet, so I paid. The bill was $96. He said he would pay me back. We got home. Wait a minute. We got home, and he wanted to play chess. We could after 2 games, which I won, and we never played again. He started to pay me back the $96 by buying me burritos. The Vagabond envisioned one sitting Burmese on a bag of corn chips, sensing the breath on the upper lip just below the nose, noticing his thoughts of pre-Columbian corn cultures and guacamole. He was sitting at the table of his being, filling up on chips before his burrito with everything arrived. Something was starting to sour inside me about all of this. I was beginning to feel I'd been tricked. Was Dave a coyote? He was persistent and had a routine, and I didn't. He had stamina, and I didn't. We would exercise for an hour every morning, and then we would walk his dog for a 2-mile walk along the Willamette River. We would come home and clean the house. I would read or write. He would work on a bicycle or his canoe. We would get high and talk with a metronome, or he'd play his banjo he made out of coffee cans. He called it a canjo. And then we would do an evening bicycle ride along the Willamette River. The vagabond said to himself, "The sunlight, dappled by wind-blown leaves, falls upon the blackberries, dandelions growing like rising suns, the taste of water on the toes, the feel of air upon the nose, the smell of dirt, rotten apples fall, filbert orchards neglected." It was gorgeous. I saw 2 bald-headed eagles and a rattlesnake. I was soon routinely riding 10 miles a day, which I had not done in years. I was getting strong. I was getting stamina. Still, Dave seemed to be a coyote, and in spite of inspiring me, I got frustrated with him. So one day, I came up to him and told him I was leaving the next day on the train. I was taking the train back to Los Angeles, where another friend of mine, Dave, lived. He was surprised, Eugene Dave. He took me to the train station, and we stopped at a bar right across the street from the station to have a beer. We sat at the bar and ordered 2 draft pale ales. I paid for them and told Dave we were even. There was a fellow younger than us, but rail riding made him look older. Dave thought he looked mean. He had the face of restless legs, diesel dust in his pores, and he was holding his bottle of beer like a club. The vagabond rants. Along the river drift the grifters, teenage runaway vagabonds from Aberdeen, Centralia, weed, gutter punk clothes piled in flailed campsites, shit, piss, and meth head angst everywhere, freight train riding white supremacist tramps desperate to couple with your cash, and lumber down their lifestyle upon your backyard, playing 3-collared monty with your political correctness and challenging your armchair worldview because you don't live in the world. You live in your backyard. You don't pick up your dog shit, so why should you expect them to pick up theirs? The guy was a fighter, we were told by the hard-working woman behind bar. Like a Green Beret, Dave asked. No, it was customers. Don't talk politics, she warned. I don't need some elitist, flaccid intellectual judging me and telling me how to live, acting as if they know everything, as if their way of life is the best way of life. Just another person who thinks they know everything. White guys sitting around discussing roads and streets and towns and lefts and rights and north and south and blah, 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 blah. I hate people who think the world is flat. I am Shay, he said, looking in our direction. Some people call me the vagabond. He looked at us in the eye as our glasses met, and he said, "Here's to burritos with everything." Dave and I downed our beers and left our change on the bar, and we walked out to the train station. My eyes were wet as I gave Dave a hug. He got into his car and drove off. He taught me I can always do more, and there is no giving up no matter what. All my friends are named Dave or David. The first friend I had in the Coast Guard was named Dave, and he went to my son's first birthday. I gave my son a pet tarantula, and my son named it Dave. Everywhere I go, I have friends named Dave. I live on a street in Madison, Wisconsin that's just a dogleg with 10 houses, and 3 Daves live there. One day I just want to run down the street and yell, "Dave!" Thank you, Dave.
I think due to time, we have to move along.
That's perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Miguel.
You're welcome.
That was fantastic. All right, so as you just heard about Eugene Day, we are so fortunate to actually have Eugene Day. And he is a musician, a luthier, a dancer, another person with Parkinson's. He's much more than just those, titles. Also a painter. He's a very creative person. His bio, this is his words. I speak The eyes are him saying I. I seek to experience the world. I focus on reality. I study the built environment. I study the natural environment. Profoundly affected by aging with Parkinson's, I examine my aspirations. I record my breaths. Inhaling restores my ability to walk repeatedly. Seeking a new path to an old ability, I find continuity and purpose. I realize I've been working towards this my whole life. Art has become what I fill my time with. I'm making progress. So I'd like to introduce Davey Cuddy. Do you want me to move it out of the way?
That's the deal with the Parkinson's meds. I'm on now. Look at this. You also talk loud. Me, may, mo, my, moo, and ah! Well, I just did that for 10 seconds, actually. I had like 65 decibels or 85 decibels, something like that. This is something that I tried to go into business making and decided I'd go back to work for the government instead. If you have a government job, it's better than making these.
Oh, wait, sorry. 1 second. I have to pass this to you.
Okay.
I forgot.
And I got to do this part here too. I was doing this different alternate tuning. A banjo is a wonderful thing. You can tune it in all different ways and play all kinds of different songs. Can you hear it okay? Yeah. Should I turn it up? So here's a song that's to Joe. Joseph, I think of him sometimes. Okay, and it's funny. And it's in a weird key, so I have to do this. It's in E, which is a strange key for band. Well, boy. Well, we're just going to have to go with that, I guess. Okay. I was born in a something city. I was raised. Let's do a different song. This one. Susie, she sees Jerry. Jerry's busy. He's with Mary, but she's leaving in the morning to see Larry. He's so boring. I don't know why you bother. There are more fish in the water. The way I see it is the way it looks. And you can say, after I say okay, you can say all right. The way I see it is the way it looks. Okay. Thank you. Jeffy ogles Jenny, she's so cute in her new swimsuit as she walks away with Johnny, who is deep in love with Connie, though she always makes excuses to go over to her friend Bruce's. So he's never home, she hangs around to find out what's been going down. Way I see it is the way it looks. Okay. All right. The way I see it is the way it looks. Okay. All right. We're all a bunch of happy ducks driving around in our little duck trucks, thinking of the other who is thinking of another, as we all walk in one big line, head to tail all the time. No one ever turns around, and no one ever turns around. No one ever turns around to stop and wonder why. Okay. Thank you. I had a bunch of songs in mind, and now I forgot every single one of them. We'll just see what comes out. At my door, oh, this is a good one. At my door, the leaves are falling. A cold, chill wind does blow. Sweethearts walk by together, and I still miss someone. Though I never got over those blue eyes, I see them everywhere. I miss those arms that held me when all the love was there. I go out on a party to have a little fun. I find a darkened corner, 'cause I still miss someone. Though I never got over those blue eyes, I see them everywhere. Imagine what trouble you get in if you sang it for brown eyes and you were married to a blue-eyed person. I think about that sometimes. Luckily, they're both one syllable, so you... I wonder if she's sorry for leaving what we begun. There's someone for me somewhere, and I still miss someone. Okay, if I have time, I have one more. Thank you. Wow, shaking down the doors. Any Grateful Dead fans out there? The thing about a banjo, you get to tune it a lot. That's the complaint people have about playing with banjo players. Finally, by the time you're done, you get it tuned, and then everybody goes home. Ooh. That should be nice. You have to wait through 4 of these. This is number 4. You've done a good job. I lit out from Reno. I was trailed by 20 hounds. Couldn't get to sleep at night. The morning came around. Set out running, better take my time. Friend of a devil is friend of mine. If I get home before daylight, just might get some sleep tonight. Ran down to the devil and he lent me 20 bills. Spent the night in Utah in a cave up in the hills. Set out running, better take my time. Friend of a devil is a friend of mine. If I get home before daylight, just might get some sleep tonight. Ran out to the levee and the devil caught me there. Took my $20 bills and vanished in the air. Set out running, better take my time. Friend of a devil is a friend of mine. If I get home before daylight, just might get some sleep tonight. Got 2 reasons why I cry away each lonely day. First one's named Sweet Anne Marie, she's my heart's delight. Second one is prison bait, the sheriff's on my trail. If she gets away with me, I'll spend my life in jail. Got a wife in Chino, got another in Chicago. First one says she got my child, second one I don't know. Better take my time, friend of a devil, but a friend of mine. If I get back before daylight, just might get some sleep tonight. All right, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. All right.
So now we're just going to have a conversation with who I call maybe a baby, or 2 Parkinson's creatives here.
No, I'll sit in this one, yeah.
I guess I'll be on the, you want me on the, no, I should, I'll be on the.
Okay, thanks.
And you are all welcome to ask questions at this time, just have a little Q&A with them, and for me, questions, but they're really more interesting than I am, so. Thank you. Can you all hear us okay? Do we need to use these? No? That row's good? Okay. No. Or, you young, do we need these for the recording? Or? Okay. Yeah. Oh, good, for that.
You want this back too?
Oh, yeah, what should we do with the, pass it back and forth to whomever's talking? Okay. So first of all, you all have been friends for quite a while. Since high school. Okay, so pre-diagnosis. I don't really know your diagnosis history, Davey. Do you want to talk? Miguel has told us a little bit about his. Do you want to talk about yours?
Yeah, sure. I was diagnosed in 2011. I was starting to walk weird, irregular rhythms, and the diagnosis went really fast and then really slow. And I remember a part where I'm in the room with the doctor, and he's talking about somebody with Parkinson's and what it's going to be like in the future, and how my first my one side's going to get slow, then the other side's going to get slow, then my arms won't move very well, and then I might get dementia and diarrhea and stuff. And I was looking in the room to see is there somebody else he's talking to me to it's behind me maybe. And I looked back like that, and there was there wasn't anybody out there. There wasn't anybody else in the room with me, and that was a feeling of, well, I guess okay. I think I went downhill for many years, and now I'm kind of figuring it out.
And so then maybe you can talk about this and then pass to Miguel to talk about this, but you can start.
Okay.
What is your relationship with your own diagnosis? Like how do you, how does that inform your creative practice?
Well, it makes me feel, at first it was weird. I felt very conspicuous walking oddly, and I had, and now I'm not, I don't worry about that. And so I try to get on with my life. And so much of my perception when I'm trying to move is about what I think other people might be thinking of me when I'm moving. And I need that perception. I need the brain power that I used to put to that perception to remember to put my left leg in front of my right leg. And that's way more critical than worrying about what I look like. So I think about it every time I move. And
Same question. Do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, I hate to say. I got absorbed into what he was saying.
Oh, that's okay. What is your relationship with your own diagnosis, and how does it inform your creative practice?
Well, it took a while to come out of denial of having the diagnosis, and I continued to basically do the things I did before I was diagnosed, which meant drugs and alcohol. I continued to do those for quite a while. I didn't quit drinking until 2019 on April 1st, which was 45 years of drinking for me. I was 60 years old. As far as how the disease informs my creative process, since the disease is not just physical, it also has cognitive issues like depression, apathy, anxiety. These things get in my way, or can be kind of writer's blocks, or they can be inspiration for writing too. So it just depends upon how I'm feeling, whether I'm inspired or blocked. But it has given me a wealth of things to write about, and also since I spend a lot of time alone, writing is a very good thing to do in solitude. And it can be therapeutic as well, getting things off your chest and such. Did I answer the question?
You did. Thank you. I'm just looking through my notes here. Let's see. Are there any goals you want to achieve creatively outside of just writing for yourself, and now bringing that to light for people to experience through this exhibition? I mean, I feel like you said that that's kind of the first place you've shared these types of writings.
Yeah, I've not ever shared these. I mean, Chicago was the first place I shared the Vagabond Dave, Eugene Dave and the Vagabond.
I think you read it in L.A.
No, I did not.
You didn't?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No. So this is the second time it's been read in public. And then the Sumter piece is the third time it's been read in public, which is actually getting published. It's getting published in the Journal of Humanities and Rehabilitation out of Emory University. Somebody sent it in after hearing it, and they decided they wanted to publish it, which is really quite flattering. So goals, I decided I would like to write a book, and maybe with the help of Dave, write a hit song.
You can pass that to Dave, because the same question applies to you, Davey. Do you have any?
Yeah, my goal is to get back in the kayak and whitewater kayak again, and do tricks like surfing and things. That was probably the funnest thing I ever did in my life. For a long time I would pretend I didn't have Parkinson's, and then when I got it, it would be then the part of the day that I did experience the symptoms, it would be a big surprise, big horrible surprise. And then as soon as I felt good again, I'd forget all about having Parkinson's and feel great, and then suddenly I started to feel bad, and and I felt like I was going to feel bad forever. Just like when I was feeling good, I felt like I was going to feel good forever. And it took a long time to realize that I'm going to feel bad sometimes and good other times. And when I'm good, I remember about the bad, and when I'm bad, I remember about the good, and that makes the whole thing smoother.
What he said.
So maybe you can talk about, here's a couple things, like you mentioned this a little bit in your writing, Miguel, like the biggest misconception about Parkinson's or prejudices you have experienced because of the way your Parkinson's manifests outwardly. Is there anything you've experienced that you just want to demystify or,
I think the physical stuff is really well known, and talked about and discussed. I think the thing that's kind of still left in the shadows is the cognitive issues and the personality crash itself. Because it is a degenerative brain disease, our personalities do not remain the same throughout it if we, depending on how long we live and what our end game looks like. And it's different for everybody, whether they're going to have dementia or psychosis or, these kinds of issues. But the likelihood is high. I don't know, I just lost my point. But yes, I guess that people need to become more and more aware of how it affects one's personality or mood. And that, for example, and bless her heart for being with me for as long as she was, but my ex-girlfriend, when we were living in Madison, thought I was depressed all the time because I had this Parkinson's masking face. And I didn't, which people might call resting B-word face, right? And she never once asked me how I felt because she just looked at me and thought, he's depressed. But I wasn't always depressed when I had that face. I was thinking about stuff. I might have been thinking about something funny.
So same question. Do you want me to repeat it again?
Please.
What do you think is the biggest misconception around Parkinson's disease, or have you experienced any kind of prejudices just based on the way the disease manifests with you visually, outwardly?
I try to be really positive, and one of the things is that the doctors treat us for symptoms that they can observe. It's very hard to describe what it's like to be the person with the symptoms. It feels different than it looks. There's a frustration with that. It takes a long time to get the medicine tuned right, and that would maybe take less time if there was a better way to describe what was going on inside. And I think there's a real psychological component to it that, if nothing else, it gives me somewhere that's pretty close to my head and my behavior that I can actually access and work on. I can actually change, the way I think about things if I think about psychology and how things are working up there. But I can't change that Parkinson's doing what it's doing. So anyway, it seems like working on myself psychologically is going to help a little bit, at least.
Also on that note, with my father, do you want to pass that down just a second? With my father's medication experience, what he said about getting the medication right, it's like a constant tweaking of the medicines. And my dad didn't always take 2.5 pills. Sometimes he took 2 pills. Sometimes he took 3. But it wasn't like it jumped around in a week. It was like a duration of time would go by, and then the medicines wouldn't have the same effect they would have. So we'd have to go back to the neurologist. They would tweak the dosage. He would have to do that again for X amount of months. And then when that started to not work as well or respond as well, he would have to tweak his medicine again. And so it's this constant fine-tuning, and again, these other medicines start to come in, like the clonazepam to help my dad sleep, or these certain kind of drops you put under your tongue to help with this thing or that thing or whatever. There was just this constant cycle of trying to get it all right, and the body keeps changing, and the medicine doesn't always, have effect, etc. Are there any questions from the audience for these guys? Okay.
Hi, you guys. Thank you very much for being here. And on behalf of all of us, thanks for providing this opportunity for us to get to know you and what it's like and what your journey is like. And I want to thank you all for sharing this with us. So thank you for that. My question would be for all of you, I think, what can we do? Like, what can people, either us as a crowd, as a group of strangers, or just individuals that want to do something to help you personally, to help you in your life? Is there something that you'd like us to know? Like, hey, for example, I'm not necessarily wrong, or something like that? Is there something that you wish that we could know that we just don't inherently know about?
I'm going to say this. This is not necessarily a direct thing to help me physically, but most of the idiopathic Parkinson's, which means the Parkinson's that they don't know what it's caused by, is usually caused by toxic environments. And Parkinson's is set to become an epidemic in the world in the next 10 years. And that means that we could prevent a lot of people from getting Parkinson's if we clean up our environment. And there needs to be a joining of the two movements, of the degenerative brain disease movements, because it's not just Parkinson's, it's Alzheimer's and ALS and MS. They're all subject to this toxicity in the environment. And we need to join those groups of the degenerative brain disease folks with the environmental folks and push for changes and not allow these, ban TCE, trichloroethylene, which is where I got my Parkinson's, I believe, which is from, TCE is known as trichloroethylene or trike or dry cleaning solvent, and was used to decaffeinate coffee. It's used to dry clean your clothes. It's not banned in this country. It's found in almost all water sources in this country, and it's in half of the Superfund sites are contaminated with TCE. And I used it every day for 8 years.
And he's actually had medical professionals sign off on it. Like, that's not just, he's not him thinking this is him knowing this. And then just something I wanted to say on the note of what you had mentioned about like just the rate of everything. I learned recently through the Parkinson's Foundation that I think it's every 6 minutes somebody is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Like, the numbers are astounding. So what he's talking about is really important. I mean, obviously we know environmental cleanup needs to happen and that we need to take care of our environment, but it's really imperative, or else we're all going to have it.
I want to say something.
Yeah.
Safi's presentation and her father, when talking about her father, I have a daughter, and it's really special to have a daughter, and I know how special it must have been for him and for her to have that relationship, and I hope I get that same kind of relationship with my daughter, but really my family is so supportive of me. I think they don't coddle me, but they're there if I really need them. I have to be big enough to ask for what I want, and I think that's good because it keeps me awake enough to ask. It's very easy to. We have to be, as a Parkinson's person, we have to be really diligent. I'm lucky I have enough time to do that. With exercises, with fitness, with eating, with the pills, with everything. And the more diligent you are, and sometimes it hurts. It seems like it's the wrong thing to do. But in the long run, the more diligent you are, the better it feels. And that's kind of everything at this point.
Right, and so some things that, on that note, I want to bring up Holly to talk, and thank you guys for everything. But on that note, I just want to say, for Parkinson's patients, they highly recommend that they ride bikes, that they do boxing, certain athletic activities, which will help kind of either control the dyskinesia or stave off the effects of the Parkinson's. It helps keep you active, obviously, and also mobile.
I think it gives you strength.
It gives you strength. It gets all your, all the juices flowing, the good ones.
Then you can use if you don't have coordination.
Right. It helps you stay coordinated because being off kilter and even with walking, the freezing gait, all of that is the struggle, right? Like that's part of the struggle that they're combating. That an average person who is not Parkinson's riddled does not realize that, like, even just taking steps at a decent pace is a difficult task for people who are diagnosed. On that note, I would like to bring up Holly, who Davey is actually wearing a shirt that is from an event that Holly's organization did. Yes. So I'm going to give you this to wear, but I want to actually first introduce you and read your bio. So I'll take that back. This is Holly Chamov. She's the Executive Director of Parkinson's Resources of Oregon. She joined PRO in August 1999. She has a BS in psychology, minor in gerontology, and a master's degree in business administration. In her tenure with Parkinson's Resources, Holly has played a key role in the positive growth and development of services for the Parkinson's community here in the Northwest. This focus has resulted in a committed community of supporters served out of offices in Bend, Eugene, and Beaverton. Holly is also a member of the Unified Parkinson's Advocacy Council and co-chairs the Independent Parkinson's Alliance. So I will let her tell you about the organization and the work that they do. I went on their website and I told my mom, who's also diagnosed with Parkinson's, I told her to go on their website and to take some of the workshops that are on there because they have amazing classes to keep people active. So you can talk all about it.
Fabulous. About 5 minutes before I left my house, I would have been a twin with Dave today because I was wearing the same T-shirt, and I don't know. I thought flowers were better today. So really, I had things I wanted to say, and then when I came today and kind of was in the room with all of this, it feels a little different. And so I think what I want to say is that if you know somebody or have family members with Parkinson's, there is a community of support. We've heard some hard truths and some joy from both of you today, and that is real, and that is what you can embrace with the diagnosis of Parkinson's. Is there's hard truth and there's joy to be had. And there's a community available to support and help. And I think, yes, we have a lot of great programs. We have a lot of activity. I'm super proud of the work we do here. But our role is really just to facilitate what the community needs and wants. And I think that is actually a sea change in the way organizations like Parkinson's Resources, Alzheimer's Association, any of these self-help organizations, we're not driving the outcomes so much anymore. These guys are driving the outcomes. We're just the facilitators, and we're bearing witness, and we're helping to amplify voices. So that's my speech. I did leave some brochures here, and I encourage anybody, just hand them off. If you know somebody with Parkinson's, they may not be ready to face a community or to face even one other person with the disease, but if you're able to give them something when they're ready, they know what to do.
Yeah, so all the pamphlets are on the gray table right there. For our second half of programming, we're going to be talking about end-of-life options. There are pamphlets also about that there.
And I have two last things. So there was a question about what can you do. There is a bill in the Congress. It's called the Ending Parkinson's Act, and the impetus behind this is to create a drive in Congress to actually tackle Parkinson's disease. You know, we fund Parkinson's disease not at all proportionally to any of the other neurological conditions. And it's a fallacy to say that Parkinson's is not a terminal disease. It's just not listed on death certificates. It is a part and a contribution to an accelerated decline for many, many people. And we just need to get more and more funding. And then the other thing I would say is that we do have a program coming up, one program pitch on grief and loss, and it's June 20th. And Safi, you mentioned this concept of anticipatory grief. Grief doesn't always happen after somebody passes. There is grief at diagnosis. There's grief before diagnosis. There is grief all along the way, and there is help and support to manage that. So you can also reach out to me, and we can get you connected. So thank you for the time today. Thank you all for your interest in being here.
Thank you. Okay, with LCOR, she's a client volunteer and Portland Outreach Coordinator. She's been interested in serving people as they explore meaning at the end of life since 2009. She has been honored to facilitate living celebrations of life for family members and assisting friends with legacy projects. She moved to Portland from Oakland, California in 2020 and has been a client volunteer with LCOR since December 2021. Lori is a social worker in her professional life. She enjoys hiking, detective and mystery novels, art and oddity collecting, and enjoying Portland's amazing food scene, which everybody has told me about since I've been here. And I've been trying to slowly check it all out. Then we have these two right here. We've got Deanna Hagee and Marianne Genta. Did I say that right? Okay, great. And they are with Evening Star End of Life Doula Services. Marianne and Deanna of Evening Star End of Life Doula Services have been providing compassionate, non-medical support for individuals and families dealing with serious illness and end of life since 2018. They also take pride in providing public and professional education on end-of-life issues in the hopes of shifting cultural beliefs about death. After being bedside for her father's death, Marianne felt called to support other families with compassionate end-of-life care. She completed her end-of-life doula training with the Conscious Dying Institute in Boulder, Colorado in 2016, volunteered with hospice, and was a core member of the End-of-Life Care Collaborative. She is currently Evening Star's representative on the Portland Elder Care Council. Marianne is always honored to be a participant in such an intimate moment of the human experience. Deanna learned of the end-of-life doula role while studying death and dying as a way of coping with the sudden death of a friend in 2008. They completed their end-of-life doula training with the Mom Doulary Death and Mourning Doula Training Program in 2015. They have volunteered with Hospice, Compassion and Choices, and currently with End of Life Choices Oregon. Deanna is passionate about empowering and educating people about death and dying, whether as clients or in community. And then on the far end, we have Emily Cummins. She's Executive Director and RN with Assured Hospice Portland. Emily is a Hospice RN and the Executive Director of Assured Hospice Portland. She's provided end-of-life care for the last 17 years and continues to serve by leading the provisions of hospice care in a rapidly evolving industry. Born and raised in Alaska, Emily hopes to someday expand the reach of comprehensive palliative care in underserved areas in her home state. So what I'd like to do is just let each of them have a moment to talk about the work that they do, and then we can get into an open discussion about things. You're welcome to ask questions, demystify anything that seems, scary to talk about. That's why we're doing this, so that there isn't fear at end of life, so that you have options, you know what your options are, you can empower yourselves and make decisions for yourselves that are right for you. So I guess we will start with you two.
All right, geez.
Yeah, if you want to pass one.
I'll pass to her and they pass to me.
I was going to say, actually, why don't you two talk about your doula work, and so why don't we take your mic so that they can each have one, and then we'll pass to both of you.
Perfect.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. As Safi mentioned, I'm Deanna with Evening Star, and we really appreciate you being here for this conversation. It's not always an easy one to have. So yeah, we've been Evening Star since January of 2018. We started with 4 partners, and life happens. There are now 2 of us, but we're still going strong. And we just want to thank Lori for contacting us about this, and Safi and Blue Sky and everyone for having us here. It's all came down just in the last few days, but we're excited to be here with this. It's an amazing exhibition. So we're just going to give you a brief intro on what end-of-life doulas are, and I'll start with the word doula. It's a Greek word that we use to mean one who serves. And you may have heard of birth doulas, and our role is very similar. We just practice on the other end of the lifespan. So end-of-life doulas are people who have training and or experience working with folks dealing with serious illness or end of life. We provide non-medical, holistic death care education, emotional support, and resources. Whether someone is healthy and planning, newly diagnosed, or nearing end of life, we meet folks where they are and provide whatever unique supports are needed by that person at that time. And you may not have noticed, but doulas are popping up everywhere. And maybe you have, I don't know, I see it. But here's why, and this is in the very broadest of terms. So in the US, until about 150 years ago, death and dying was a family and community event. People were cared for at home during their illness. Then after their death, the community built the coffin and dug the grave, and the wake was held in the family home. During the Civil War, the practice of embalming was employed to enable transport of the bodies of dead soldiers to get home over long distances. Embalming became more popular after the war, funeral homes became more commonplace, and combined with the development of modern medicine and the medicalization of death, knowledge of this profound time has been largely removed from people's common experience. So as a result, as a culture, we've become increasingly disconnected from death. And as people are becoming aware of the challenges and sometimes complex support needs for folks dealing with serious illness and end of life, the doula role has come about in the last 2 to 3 decades to provide that extra needed support. And to clarify, while the role of end-of-life doula may seem new, it really isn't. It's an ancient role. It still exists in a lot of cultures, but it's having to kind of make a comeback here as a result of our disconnect. Doulas strive to give the lost knowledge of dying back to families and communities. We believe that death is really not a medical event. It's a natural process with social, emotional, and spiritual components that need addressing just as much, if not more, than the physical. And when these internal concerns aren't acknowledged, it can lead to people dying with layers of emotional distress and families not receiving the support they need. According to the National End-of-Life Doula Alliance, doulas are at the forefront of social change in America that will have far-reaching positive impacts on those who are served. And this statement rings very true for us. We call ourselves culture activists as we work to shift the cultural ideas about death, one client, one family, one art gallery presentation at a time. We'll present anywhere. We've done bank lobbies, we've done libraries. Anyone will have us, we'll talk about it. So some ways that we do that. We focus on normalization of end of life, and we serve as role models in how to be with illness and death. We educate on the many options at end of life, like home funerals, green burial, natural organic reduction, or also called human composting, aquamation, and palliative and hospice services. We also provide information and support for medical aid in dying and voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. We help people expand their support team by offering connections to local resources who provide services that we don't. We can be a neutral third party, which can be helpful as we find a lot of families want to protect each other when they're dealing with an end-of-life experience. With us, they can speak their minds, and we can encourage and provide practice for them to have open and honest family conversations. Conversation is really key in the work that we do. We also do a lot of permission granting to folks to speak their truth and to make plans that align with their values. We know that not all people in our country receive the same quality of health or death care due to factors like sexual orientation, race, and class. Working with a doula can empower people to become better advocates for themselves and for their loved ones if they're not receiving the quality of care they would expect from a healthcare provider or facility. We encourage folks to get the legal paperwork done. Many people may not realize who will be in charge of their health decisions, finances, or funerals if they don't have these documents in place, and the default is next of kin. This planning is especially important for folks who aren't in touch with their families of origin, and also for the LGBTQ+ community to ensure proper upholding of their identities. These documents allow people to assign these important roles to people they trust, who know them, and who will follow their wishes. And while we can't always guarantee perfect outcomes, our hope is that by supporting people in getting their planning done as early as possible, we can lessen the chance of crisis down the line.
And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the tools that we use. So our foundational tools are deep presence and active listening. And so what we've heard from clients is that being heard is actually one of the most valuable supports that they can receive, especially when faced with illness and end-of-life issues. And we'll never walk into someone's journey with any sort of agenda. So we really need to be listening to what our clients' needs and values are. And sometimes they need support in even figuring out what their needs and values are. So So from there, we can provide information and resources that can really help them shape their end-of-life experience to how they would like that to go. We create a safe space for them to process whatever they're facing. And as a result, this work looks different with every single client that we work with. And it can be really difficult to feel heard in the medical system. And sometimes even friends and family can't or won't actually be able to hear their loved one through their process. We can't really be upset with them because our culture hasn't really trained us very well in how to be present for those types of conversations, and making suggestions on how to fix things is really maybe just the person's attempt to feel better in that conversation. So we're all doing our best, but we can definitely, by having more enriched experiences and better education, mend this for the future, for this to go even better. So two of the most popular tools that doulas use, or tools of the trade, are legacy work and vigil planning. And not everyone chooses these options, but they are utilized pretty regularly, and I'm going to tell you about them. So in the realm of doula language, we think of legacy as encompassing the wisdom and emotional and spiritual inheritance that we leave behind for our loved ones. And the purpose of thinking about legacy is to help shift one's focus from that of loss to that of a life well lived. Successes, relationships, meaningful experiences, life learnings, and values. And one of the greatest fears for an individual that's nearing end of life might be, how will I be remembered, or even will I be remembered? And our culture hasn't really taught us a lot about rituals of remembrance, and so sometimes engagement in a legacy project can kind of serve that purpose. And legacy projects allow people to leave their wisdom and emotional legacy in a tangible or concrete format, so that loved ones can continue having a growing and changing relationship with their person even after their death. And the project can look so different for each individual. It can be a book, it can be photographs, it can be a video, a garden, anything. So the Legacy Project has actually even been shown through research to lessen emotional symptoms for the dying, which in turn can really help reduce the stress for caregivers. And the purpose and intent passed through such projects can inform, inspire, and impact future generations, proving that one's life journey can be a teachable experience for loved ones past and present and future. I don't mean past. A vigil is the time when family and friends hold space and tend to their loved one that is starting to actively die. And a vigil plan is a document that really helps capture someone's dying wishes for bedside presence, right? And so it's a flexible document that can really focus on the senses and capture someone's wishes before they're not able to speak for themselves anymore. And it's not so much a list of things to do bedside, but it's rather suggestions of ways to show up for your person. It can be focused on what type of music might you like playing, how might you like to be touched or not. Do you want fragrance or aromas in the room? So everything that can keep someone stimulated while they're declining and keep them as actively engaged until their last breath. And it's based on things that they might find comforting in their lives now. And if that changes as a diagnosis progresses, the document can change to reflect that. And another great thing about the vigil plan is that instead of leaving that to be guesswork for your close friends, family, your circle that's going to be bedside, you've already told them your wishes, and it's written down. And so there's the elimination right there of second guessing yourself or trying to make decisions in a time of crisis. What would that person want? Or encouraging family dynamics to get kind of, not that great because everyone's feeling stressed and sad. So it really helps that you've already set the scene for your people and they can make improvisations and judgment calls with your information. So that's handy. And so doulas are not legal advisors, counselors, chaplains, social workers, or funeral directors, and we don't do physical caregiving. We understand where our expertise stops, and we love educating our clients with other resources in town that do the things that we don't do. And yeah, I think I will pass it on from there. We can keep going, so.
You can go ahead and pass that down to Emily, and then we will have Lori speak next. My father did not choose the option, well, he didn't ask for dying with dignity, which is, for a really horrible way to say it, assisted suicide. I don't think that's probably the right way to say it. I don't know what you say.
We'll talk about that.
Thank you. I don't know.
That's okay.
He was right now for it, but in the past it had been called assisted suicide. I mean, yes, my dad did not ask for that option. In California, I know that option is, there's a very small window for people who have neurodegenerative disorders that, in California, I was under the understanding that you have to have only 6 months left to live. You must be cognitively able to make the choice, and you must be physically able to ingest the medicines. And so that would not have worked in my father's case, which eliminates him as a potential, eliminates that as a potential option for him. So in a sense, it's a discriminatory practice, the way they have it set up in California. I would love for you, since Oregon is on the forefront of offering this option, I would love for you to speak on that and also the work in general.
I will add that in.
Thank you.
Not to correct you, just to have the free
I
terminology.
would love to know.
So it's okay. I appreciate that. Well, I'm Lori Brashears. I'm with End of Life Choices Oregon, and we are a nonprofit, and we educate the community, and a lot of times also the medical community, and we do individual service. So we do bedside service, which you guys kind of mentioned, and we work with individuals and their families. And really our focus is much narrower than an end-of-life doula. We love doulas, we love hospice, we will get to talk to next. And really our focus is working with that individual on accessing the death with dignity law. So in very brief, often what we do is we educate them, we offer technical support, and then that emotional support if they go through using some of those options that lead to what we call a planned death. And
That's a better terminology.
yes, planned death.
Yes, I will use that terminology.
Sometimes we even say expected death because sometimes you don't want the police coming when you died at home and someone doesn't know that you're doing that. So we might use that as well sometimes. So I'm just going to say, because Safi brought it up, and I'm glad you did, because this comes up a lot, is this suicide. It's not usually where I like to start in a presentation, but I think it's out, so it's okay. No, because when I was in graduate school, like that's what we called it, right? So Oregon was the first state. It was the late 90s. There are now 10, and DC. So 11 jurisdictions that have these laws, and they are often really similar, Safi, and you're right, there is some discrimination regarding who can use it and who can access it. And back in the day, I think there was a lot of concern. And ability and different ability advocates were concerned, and advocates for aging Americans were concerned that this was a way to kill off old people and people with differences. That has not come to fruition. There's around 40,000 deaths in Oregon every year, and less than 300 people use this law. So it really hasn't shown over time. We aren't seeing people use this because they have mental illness and are depressed. They aren't using it because they're disabled. I wanted to do the why last, but I'm just gonna say, I thought about your title a lot this week, personality crash. And I would say that when people come to us and they have a planned death because they're using the law, the why is often control. The why is to end immeasurable suffering. But really, more than anything, I think the why is a personality crash. That the quality of their life has changed to the effect that they know they're done. And for them, this decision is usually pretty steadfast, although we always tell them they have choice, and up until the very moment they drink that lethal medication, they're sure Sometimes the family and the chosen family and the friends aren't always sure. And so sometimes they're kind of what I might call a secondary client in this. But essentially, life goes on until the last day. And as you guys talk about birth doulas, and we don't talk about death doulas as often, but we're seeing it become more and more prevalent, that discussion. So we're really living until that last day, and you have rights and you have choices. And because you live in Oregon, you have a law. And essentially that law says that you can stop or not start treatments that you no longer want. And not everyone knows that. Like sometimes we're just not empowered in that medical system, and you talked about that a little bit, to think like, I don't have to do this, or I can stop doing this. So that's one thing that we might approach people about. The other thing is hospice, and we actively promote hospice in every case, because we know that that is a great comfort, spiritually, emotionally. You guys are often the ones that call the mortuary to come. And also when you're in hospice, there's really not a question that it's an expected death. So the two big reasons people come to us aren't necessarily those. As a client volunteer, I'm often working with people who are using MAID, which is medical aid in dying. And that's what we call this now often, is MAID. Sometimes people ask us, is this suicide? We see it as different because this is a peaceful death, this is a planned death, this is carried out because someone is terminal anyway and they will die. When people often complete suicide, they are in emotional pain, they could be surviving, and it's often violent and surprising to their loved ones. So those are big differences in how we see that and why we've gotten away from that other term we say MAID. So with MAID, as Safi said, there are windows of opportunity if you may. And so the basics of that law, I'm not going to bore you, and I'm not a lawyer anyway, but we do uphold the law and we make sure we do everything within that law. And so you have to be 18 or older in Oregon. You have to have a terminal illness with expected 6 months or less to live. You have to be able to make medical decisions. So I like to tell my clients, it's not a high bar. The mental capacity isn't a super high bar. But you do need to be able to make mental decisions. You have to understand what this will do and be clear about that over a period of time. If we have a concern, we do a mental status exam, but those are pretty rare and aren't super common. California tried to add that into everyone, and they found that it was a huge barrier and it was discriminatory, and they've stopped doing that. The other thing that someone has to do is they have to self-administer. And so we can get creative, but self-administer is usually an oral route. It could be through a feeding tube or through rectal administration as well. So if people can push a tube or drink, we want them to drink that lethal medication in about 1.5 to 2 minutes. It's not a lot of liquid, so you don't have to gulp it. We don't want them doing that. That's getting into a lot of details we don't necessarily get into. But self-administration, if someone has a neurodegenerative disease, our doctors can be creative. They're still going to self-administer, but maybe they can move their head and they can push that plunger. We can get creative. So that is MAID. When we're working with someone with MAID, what we are really doing with them and their family and their support team is we're really helping them through eligibility and then helping them facilitate what we call a planned death. And so that basic eligibility is usually at least 16 days. Unless it can be expedited. We have an expedited rule from 2021 legislation, which you'd have to be pretty eminent to hit that. And then the steps kind of go out the window, and it can be really creative. But basically, it's a 16-day window. The person's going to make 2 oral requests to a physician. It's going to be recorded in their medical chart. They're going to do a written request that's witnessed by others. And then they're going to be asked questions day of. So we work with families to get through this eligibility maze because it can look confusing, and if you're ill or you're busy caregiving, we're here to be like, here's the next step. This is the next step. How you doing? Is this something you still want to do? And so when we have planned deaths, our clients are often doing what your clients are doing and inviting who will be there that day, who do they maybe say goodbye to before, is there music? I've had people have NASCAR on because that's what they love, and so they get to go into coma and have a peaceful death in NASCAR. I've had planned deaths with Jello shots. I didn't take one, I was on duty, but sometimes there's food, there's often laughter, there's always tears, and I think similar to what you guys said, leading up to that can be surreal. And so sometimes we're encouraging people to let it be what it is and not make that time perfect. As people make a birth plan, we make a death plan. And just as people make a birth plan, sometimes that birth plan changes if that labor goes on, right? So we're doing that. That's what we're doing when we talk about MAID. The other big option that people come to us for is called VSED, and what that stands for is voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. And this can be a great option for people who aren't terminally ill. They might be, and they can use that option, but you can also use this option if you have a very hard to manage illness. So you would be eligible to do that, and technically you can do it in all the states. But what we do is we walk people through what it's going to mean to voluntarily really stop eating and drinking. And we really mean that because any little bit of water can really prolong life. So what we do in those cases are we're working with people to get their support team together, how they're going to access hospice at a certain point of that VSED process, because VSED can take a little bit of time, maybe 10 to 15 or so days. Everyone's a little different, and I like some of the discussion that we had earlier around everyone's disease manifests different. So that piece is going to, planned death with MAID there's a timeline, but it's different for each person, so as V said. So with those types of cases, what we're really doing is working with the individual, putting together their support team. It's not just going to be the spouse and them. That's probably not enough. It's too exhausting to go through VSED. People often think, isn't that awful? I can't VSED for a day. I can't do fasting. But really, with the medications that are prescribed, having hospice in there, and giving comfort care for oral care, it's actually a pretty peaceful way to go, and people that go through it often are pretty peaceful, comforted, and not suffering as they have been with their terminal or hard to manage illness. So that's really what we do at End of Life Choices Oregon. We have some brochures back there, and I'm going to hand this off to hospice, but the other thing I just wish people knew is if they ever thought that they might want to utilize the law, I would say call us earlier than later. And you can call us if you're the client, but a spouse can call an adult child, a hospice worker. We've had referrals from hospice. It is the individual's choice, and we will emphasize that, and that's our client. But when you're really ill or you're battling things, better to be eligible and know your rights than lose your eligibility or rapidly decline. So I always say you can become eligible and never use it, and it's really the choice is yours. So that's what we do.
Yeah, that's really wise. Yeah, to ask for it before you need, and then, but you have to have the 6 months left to live diagnosis.
For me,
Oh, for me.
but not for voluntarily stopping eating. And I will say, what would a reason be that people use voluntarily stopping eating and drinking is dementia diagnoses. So what happens is, by the time you have 6 months or less, if you have Alzheimer's, you will not have the capacity for medical decision-making, self-administration. You lose your eligibility because of that.
Right.
But people can VSED, and so a lot of times people that come to us do have dementia. They're early in their disease. And the hard part of that is choosing quality over that quantity of days. So VSED isn't super popular, but it really is something that you don't have to live in Oregon to do. It really is, you can do it anywhere, but I think a lot of people just don't know about it.
Thank you. All right, we'll turn it over to Emily to talk about hospice.
Hi, I'm Emily. I am a hospice nurse and the executive director of Assured Hospice here in Portland. I've done end-of-life caregiving my entire career. I've never held another job besides caregiving. And I just have a really close relationship with death and dying. And I mean, first, I do want to say what a testament to Safi's character that she has invited all of us up here to speak, because hospice and end-of-life care was what broke her faith in the medical system. That hurts. That hurts my heart.
I hope my experience was one out of a gazillion.
Right.
That all the other ones have been positive. I'm sure it has.
And I think it happens a lot, a lot. And thankfully, we're in the Pacific Northwest, and we just have a better outlook on death and dying, and a better culture around it. But first off, how important this work is to show death and dying in a way that isn't dehumanizing, it's not chaotic, it's not, this awful thing that we see on the media a lot. And we don't talk about death either, so putting this in the forefront, putting this in front of everyone's minds is just really an important thing to do. We don't talk about it, especially America. No one in the US talks about death and dying, and it's such a shame. With Maslow and Piaget's human development, it spans the entire life. When we think of human development, we think, toddlers, adolescents, young adult. It doesn't end there. It continues to end of life. There's growth, there is self-actualization, there are things that we can learn, there's things that we can, pass on to our family and our loved ones, and we can't do that if we're not talking about it, if we're not thinking about it. So it's just, I think if that's the only takeaway is not a hospice takeaway for me, but it's just to keep thinking about it. Think about how you want to spend your last days. Have those conversations with your loved ones. It's very often what happens is mom or dad falls, gets a UTI, something happens where they can't make decisions for themselves. They've never had a conversation with their kids about it. And, out of guilt of, I want to walk away from this thinking or saying I did everything I could for my mom or dad, and they're throwing the book at them of medicine. And it's unfortunate. That is suffering to me. That is, and, most of I think it's 20% of healthcare costs are in the last few years of life. It's crazy. It's crazy. And a little bit about hospice. I think there's a really good understanding of what hospice is. 6 months or less. But really the only thing that is required for hospice care is that the patient and the family are in agreement that they want comfort care. That's it. Everything else kind of just falls into place. Yes, there's boxes of eligibility that we need to fit in for Medicare, but you just need to be on the same page. And I think I would be remiss to just talk a little bit about all of the disparities or how care differs in hospice. It's a brand new field, right? So hospice came to the US from the UK in the 60s. It was a social movement in the 70s, came around with AIDS. It didn't start being recognized as a service that Medicare would start reimbursing until 1982. And the World Health Organization didn't even recognize hospice and palliative care as a human right until 2016. That's crazy. That's mad. And it's, the industry, because it's so new, it's changing so much all the time, very rapidly. And one of the things that's happening now is that instead of it being a service that is reimbursable just for being there, just for saying that you're providing hospice care, it's moving to a value-based reimbursement system to where they're going to pay out for quality care. So those hospices that aren't giving good care, where their patient satisfaction surveys aren't great, they're not going to be making money. So they're going to be putting quality care up front as like paramount. This is what it needs to be. So hopefully at some point across the country, anyone can walk into hospice care and there's going to be some standards there. There's going to be, you know, prioritizing symptom management and psychosocial, emotional, spiritual health and well-being. And let's see, what else did I want to say?
And to say nurse, right?
Oh, consistency is huge.
Consistency for, you know, that's
Especially with memory care, you know, with memory, somebody who has memory issues, or, you know, dementia, Alzheimer's, et cetera. Consistency is so key, and it's what we did not get. And I mean, as the family member who, thankfully, I've done work with the human body, so I didn't flinch when I learned to pack my dad's bed sore, which literally was a hole that I could see his bone. It went through his skin all the way. And not every family member could do that for somebody. Fortunately, I was able to handle that. But, you know, the inconsistency was what led me to just take care of it for him, because it caused him distress, and I knew I could handle it, so it was just like, cut the crap and get this. I repeat myself 20 times, and I know he'll have good care, so I just did it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that is asked on those patient satisfaction surveys is, did you have a nurse case manager? Did you have your pastoral care, your chaplain? Did you have your social worker? So I know that that's something that they're really going to, you know, put forward as something that is important. Because I mean, you can imagine if mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, they're very stoic, right? If grandpa stubs his toe, he's not going to say, "Ow, that hurts." He's going to, you know, bite his tongue and, you know, be strong. And so when there's ever any discomfort towards the end of life and there's stoicism, they're not volunteering that information like, "I hurt, I'm uncomfortable." Having that relationship with that one nurse case manager to know that he is in pain because we're seeing other things, and it's not just he's verbalizing what's going on. And that's really important for, you know, hospice fits really well for cancer and AIDS, right? It was not made for long-term chronic illnesses like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. It is so unfortunate because there's so much help, there's so much support that could be given to those patients and those families at diagnosis, not at the last 6 months of life. There's a whole lot that goes on, psychosocial, emotional, holistically, that people really should be getting the support for. And I hope that in the future, the hospice benefit does change to a needs-based benefit instead of a prognosis-based benefit. But recognizing those early signs of eligibility, and it's hard. As a hospice nurse, one of the biggest barriers that we face is that physicians aren't educated on hospice or end of life. You know, every single physician going through education, they have to take a labor and delivery class just on the off chance that they're going to deliver a baby. Hospice and end of life care is an elective. They don't have to take it. Which, I mean, death is such a certain thing. What Benjamin Franklin said, that there's only 3 certain things in life: death, taxes, and learning, I think. So, I mean, like, we know that it's going to happen. Birth happens, death happens. Why aren't we giving it the time and attention it deserves? It's really hard, and I don't know if you guys have ever tried to educate a physician, but it's not easy. They don't want to listen to you. So there's some big barriers.
There's no physicians out there.
Yeah.
So I want to open up the floor. I know we're pushing time
Yep.
here. I want to open up the floor, and if anybody in the audience has a question.
Yeah. So I'm in my 80s. I have small things wrong with me from head to toe. It's a list this long. And I have a lot of frustration with doctors because they seem to have the mission of keeping me alive forever. And I have begun to say that to them because it really pisses me off. I mean, I have one that wants to give me a minor surgery now. And, you know, I'm watching the amount of money that is being spent on me. It's extraordinary. And I'm not depressed, and my life is not horrible. But I also know I'm not going to live forever. And I just had a doctor say, oh, you can live another 15 years. It's like, why? Just see my great-grandchildren get older. That would be nice. But, you know, it's just, I really think, I'm glad you said that, and I really think we need to change doctors' attitudes so much. About 25 years ago, I took care of a close friend dying of cancer at home with hospice support. It was very lucky. It was a wonderful experience. And they were very supportive. And I learned, I remember the day the hospice nurse got out rubber gloves and she said, you'll be dealing with bodily fluids soon. And I just thought, ah! And yet when it came, I loved her. That's why I was there. And it was fine. And I did not know it would be fine. And it's just something about realism that is missing. And I don't know if you all have any advice. My doctors seem very shocked when I tell them I don't want to live forever.
I hear it all. I mean, we hear this all the time, and I think you should be talking to some doulas. But you know, you do have the right to say, I don't want these treatments, or I want to go a lesser route, and get your affairs in order and make those healthcare decisions, because unfortunately the healthcare system is still really steeped in survival at all cost. Oregon had a huge medical aid and dying conference in February, and I was watching this oncologist thinking, you would never be my doctor, because it was all about anything at all cost. And I just thought, I don't know. And so I think it's a minority of people sometimes that are like, I don't know that I'd want. I think if you're not in that position, you don't know. But we hear all the time from people like, I've had a good life, I don't want extraordinary measures. And if people were to do CPR on you today, your recovery and my recovery would look so different, because they're going to break ribs. And then what's the complications there? So I want to empower you to have those conversations with your medical providers, and you can ask, well, what would happen then? Well, why would it, and go for those medical treatments that you really want. It is your right under the law. And I don't think you're weird. I think you're really smart to be thinking about, this is my life, this is what I want, and you just unfortunately have to fight for it.
Quality.
We have to remember too that doctors are raised in the same culture as everyone else. And yeah, the end of life training they get is that much. So we need medical schools to change their curriculum for one, and also just the fact that the phrase, if I die, exists in our culture. If I die. So we're just so disconnected. Yeah. We just really are. And so I'm all about the realism as well. So yeah, I think really standing up for yourself and advocating for yourself.
Oh, I have. So I have it on my refrigerator now.
Oh, the polls, yeah.
Good. One of those. I have all the stuff.
All the stuff filled out.
It's the doctor's attitude that bothers me.
Yes.
And it's not just about me, it's the whole culture and the resources spent on us in our last decade of life.
If you ever find an answer, let me know.
We're working our asses off trying to change.
I know.
We're not going to see it in our lifetimes, but we're hoping future generations will benefit from all the talking we're out doing.
Yeah.
Wake up.
So, are there any other questions?
Is this the
accessible for like out-of-state people?
Yes.
Is it like a tourism zone?
Yes. So, do you live here? Oh, sorry. I need that. Oh, sorry. Okay. If you're an Oregon resident, you might know that the legislature's been a little naughty and they're holding up stuff because they're not meeting. Okay. So Vermont, you can go to Vermont and use Death with Dignity if you're not a resident, and you can come here and use it safely in Multnomah County here because we had a lawsuit that was settled and that said that people could come here from out of state. I think all of Oregon is really doing that. Really, the lawsuit was settled here. I think you'd be okay in other counties. The law was supposed to change this session. It's just sitting there because we have some legislators, not meeting because they're wanting to do that. So you can easily Google those states and then find out the ones that don't have the requirement for out of state. I believe New Mexico is another state. Jane, does that sound right? New Mexico, you can go without being a resident? Yeah. New Mexico has the most progressive end-of-life legislation of all places. And we were like, how did you do that? And it took them 8 years, but they were studying the other laws.
Yeah.
So yes, you can go to another state that doesn't have it.
Thank you.
Right, yeah. I will mention, I handed a little note to this dear lady here. 2 excellent books about what she was talking about. Are Being Mortal and The Art of Dying Well.
Katie Butler.
And they talk about, probably 99.99999% of physicians, they think there are only 2 goals, to cure and to extend life.
Right.
And unfortunately, at this point in our culture, we have to advocate aggressively for ourselves and say, those aren't my goals. I have other goals than that. And help me, maintain my quality of life and help me reach my goals. Not your goals, not the goals society has for me or medical practice, but these are my goals. And unfortunately, we have to fight for ourselves.
Well, on that note, I think we have to, because of time, start wrapping up. So I would like to.
Thank you, and we'll be here. If there's other questions, I can stay for a little bit.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for sticking around to the last group here and for attending today's programming. I hope it was valuable, impactful, and enlightening. I'm also so thankful again to my panel of performers and presenters. And to Blue Sky, those of you who are visible, and to my family, my mother, and mostly to my father for this gift of making this body of work together and allowing it to be shared publicly. And then I just wanted to say, for those of you who haven't seen the show in full, I hope you'll stick around and do the audio component, and I hope you all will also sign the guest book.